thank you for coming, and it was a bit of a quick... Can you come to the Mother's... And as you said this morning, it's about your relationship with yourself first, so very happy to have you here. A man of wisdom and a man of great presence, so thank you very much. And his assistant, Katrina.
Yeah, this beautiful fusion of Western psychology and Eastern philosophy, religion, alternative healing, so the whole combination of that, which makes for a beautiful journey, and so I'm so happy and honored to be here.
And to you, darling.
Thank you. Marie's, as you know, is one of the most amazing human beings on the planet. Yeah, I'm gonna...
I just want a boyfriend.
Or two.
Whatever.
Keep going, we can put this on YouTube.
There you go.
It's a dating site, perhaps.
I actually did Marie's chart, 7-8 years ago, and she's got something like 5 or 6 planets in Cancer, and just one of the ultimate carriers of the feminine and the feminine divine, the divine feminine, and a nurturer from way back. And one of the things, well, I talked to a group a few years ago when I was back in Sydney, and invited everyone to make a point that whenever you see her, give her a hug, because she's a great giver, and it's really worth giving back. She's good. You're looking witchier every time I see... Isn't she?
Yeah.
She's getting witchier. So I do a bunch of things, and the astrology for me is what I call my passionate hobby. It's an extraordinary tool for self-awareness and self-understanding. And my approach to astrology when I do charts is very much to look at what your gifts are, what your challenges are, what your karmic and spiritual path is. And people tell me that that's of value to them. And sometimes I do that with babies too. And then I can also look at the relationship that you're going to have with your child. So that's a fun thing. I don't know what to say. This is all sort of very sudden, and hello, and God, it's good to be back in Sydney after 6 years back in America. It's quite an amazing place, and it's so good to be back. Australia is just a whole other trip, and we've got a lot here that the rest of the world really doesn't have. And for me as a Libran, one of my focus points very much is relationships, and particularly, obviously you're starting with your relationship with yourself, and then with kids. And when I come back, I mean, just instantly I see the healthiness of Australians in their relationships in ways that just don't exist in America. And hopefully we won't lose that. Hopefully we don't lose that. So I'm an expert on babies. I used to be one.
I love it.
And I think my son was a home birth, and we've been hanging out a lot this last week. He just turned 30 and survived his Saturn return. So I have some experience at parenting, and apparently doing it reasonably well. So the one thing I really see with kids is they're natural. They're a natural event. There's so much crap that gets fed to us about how to raise children, and a lot of that's to keep you in fear and anxiety and insecurity, so that you look to buying things, look for external stuff to buy. It's how our consumer society functions, or dysfunctions, I should say. And one of the things I love to say to parents is, kids are natural. Breathing's natural, kids are natural. Their wants are so few, it's ridiculous. They want to be held and loved, fundamentally, and occasionally fed and occasionally, changed. But they're really just like, I always invite parents to don't stress with your kids. You know how to be a parent if you let yourself know that you know. It's part of who we are. And your kids just want you to love them. There's nothing else. There's nothing else. The rest of it's an interesting story, whether you buy them stuff or, you know, whatever. And be with them as much as you can. Luke, my son, from the first night of his life, for the first 9 months, slept in my arms. And, you know, so we had him in the bed, and then if he woke up, you know, I'd roll him over onto his mum, and he'd have a meal and fall asleep. And people, you know, literally attacked me over that, especially when I do a lot of media, and I do interviews around Sydney, you know, TUE and that sort of stuff. Oh, that's wrong. I'm like, how do you figure that? Like, what mammal do you know has kids and then puts them in a separate cave to go? Like, really?
I just want to get some sleep.
Hey? Yeah. But the paradox in my experience was that that it's when you put them in a separate cave that they're going to keep you away, and that they're going to scream, because guess what they want? You near them.
Yeah.
And it can create, you know, it can be an extra burden in some ways, but I really think it's worth it in the bonding of it. And Kat, who's, you know, as we said, is she's an old friend of mine, and very committed to her life and her path, to the degree that she's crazy enough to hang out with this nutty old Aussie and travel the world and be my assistant and learn and master all she can. And she's been really hanging out to meet my son and see us together, and having been seeing us for the last week has just been blown away, because one of the things that I set out the day my son was born, I made an absolute commitment that no matter what it took, when he turned 20, we were going to be friends. And fortunately, that commitment got fulfilled. And I think that's really important, that as a parent, never forget that your primary role is to be your kid's best friend. Yeah? And you give them guidance and set boundaries and set your rules and whatever you do, but you're not being paid to be a cop. Yeah? That's not your job. You're not a cop. You're a friend. You know, you're there as the friend, as a guide. Just the other night, have you read Khalil Gibran, the prophet? If you haven't, or even if you have, I really advise you to read his piece on children. And I read it again the other night. It's been one of my guiding lights in my philosophy with children. Is just he nails it. He nails it. So relax. The other thing I want to share about kids that I really learnt was that they're an opportunity for you to reclaim your humanity. Yeah,
That's true.
and break through the conditioning, whatever limiting conditioning you had. So when your kid's crying, have a look at what in you is stressed. Yeah, and check in with you that they might be picking up. Like sometimes kids are amazingly sensitive. I kind of view them as just a huge sensitive organ. Yeah, in a bag of skin. They're unbelievable. Well, they are really. I mean, they're so sensitive. So they're picking up on where we're at and responding appropriately. So if they're stressed, there's a really good chance that you're feeling stress. So bring it back to yourself, take a deep breath, chill out, whatever. And my experience again with Luke was just often dramatic, where the second I shifted whatever was going on for me, he just stopped crying. It was like, oh, you know, Dad sorted his problem out, whatever his issue was. So yeah, any questions?
I just want to say too, you had an amazing mother. That's why he's an amazing
This
man.
is true. I had amazing parents.
You did.
Yeah.
So now you understand
Yeah.
why he talks like
Yeah.
he talks, and he's come from a very
How many kids were
evolved
there?
family.
Well, four.
Oh,
One
so
died,
four.
but four
That's
boys.
right, that's
Yeah,
right.
I was the oldest.
Oh, so
Yeah,
right.
she's still around and kicking. She's 86, and we saw her yesterday actually, and you know, she's dangerous.
We used to have Stella come in and talk as a grandmother and the wise woman about what she's learned over the years, how she started her consciously growth path.
Yes.
At what age was she?
59, her second Saturn return.
When she started really
Yeah.
going within consciously, and then
Yeah.
did primal at what age?
Well, she came and did
She worked with you.
She did the
Did
seminar.
your
I run
stuff.
a 3-day personal transformation seminar around the world called The Living Game, and she did that when she was 59. And that just sent her on a track that she's been on for 27 years. She did feeling release or primal work with Marie. She did
Amazing.
Japanese flower arranging, meditation, yoga, Buddhism,
She
like
did everything,
the whole
yeah.
thing, just everything. She was on a search and on a path. And in fact, she was saying to Katrina the other day that for her, correct me if I'm misquoting, but for her, part of that path was very much motivated by the fact that she knew that at some point she was going to die and she wanted to do it really well. Yeah? And I think that's quite a profound motive for personal awareness, because my experience is that doing personal growth, personal awareness is about expanding your capacity to live. And the more we expand our capacity to live, the more we open up to the mystery of life, the mystery of dying, and that in turn creates a loop where we get into more amazingness about living and life. Yeah? And I really encourage everyone to live life large, and encourage your kids to. And really trust them. They're not... Our culture, going back to Victorian days, where fundamentally the belief was the kids came in and they're this blob of cells, and that the parents' job is to, write large on a blackboard, give them the formulas, tell them how to live. And I very much took the Bali is one of my great loves, and in Bali they come from a place firstly where they say there's no right or wrong, there's just choices and consequences. So they teach their children to be clear that there's choices and consequences. Now go make the choices you want. And they'll point out consequences, but they won't say don't do it. And that's how I raised my son, and his mum and I separated, but that's how we raised him. And I knew I'd succeeded when he was 9. I had a seminar centre in Double Bay on the top floor of a building, and it had one of those sort of New York style fire escapes in the back, that concrete stairs and a metal rail with a hole 3 stories down. And I went out one morning, and Luke's 9 playing with his buddy from school, and they're doing monkey bars over the hole. And I saw this and freaked and sort of went, Luke, got a minute? And he came in. I said, dude, that's really dangerous. He said, why? I said, well, if you fall, you're going to really damage you. He said, do you think I'm stupid? Why would I fall? And I'm like, well, but you could. He said, look, I get it. You don't want to do that. It scares you. I'm fine with it. Get over it. And he turned around, walked back, and just went back on the monkey bars. And I was like, yes. And of course, he never fell. So it's like really empowering our kids to find their truth, which is within them, rather than to limit them and force them to live our truth. That's cloning. That's human cloning. And most of us were cloned to some degree. Yeah. And in the process of raising our kids, we tend to see where we got cloned and what our limiting beliefs are. Because they will push your buttons, I promise, if they're not already.
That story you told about Luke, that reminds me of my brother and I. We've got just different raising skills of kids.
Yeah.
And I'm a lot more relaxed than he is.
Yeah.
I'm pretty free with my kids, and all the time he goes, he could smash his head, and I go, oh, I know he could.
Yeah, yeah.
It never happens, but I know he could.
Yeah. And part of it for me is honouring also the fact that they chose you. Yeah. Or they didn't, or it's all random and meaningless. I mean, that's possible, but it's not how I see life. So I see that there is a meeting of spirits where, the kids we have, we've called them into the world, and they've chosen us as their parents. And so there's, by definition, spiritual and karmic lessons and paths and bonds to be had together. So some people need to have very strict parents for whatever reason, or even abusive parents for whatever karmic reasons. but you're also not stuck with that. You know, we got new choices we can have here, and to just, the thing for me with my first real lesson with Luke about the genius of children, playing with that Balinese idea. His first winter, he was 6 months old, and we had one of those kerosene heaters, you know, the radiant heaters. They're hot. I mean, they kick out some heat. He was crawling around on the floor, and he saw this thing, and he beelined towards it. And his mum, Linda, went to grab him. I said, hang on, let's just see what he does. And as he approached the heater, he got to about 5 feet from it, and he felt the heat, and he stopped. And he sat up, and he put his hand out, moved forward, put his hand out, moved forward. He spent half an hour thoroughly exploring that heater. He got round, the front was hot, he moved around the side. He got right up till he touched it, was fine. Then he stood up, and then he put his hand over the top, hot, round the other side. Half an hour, totally explored the heater and never went near it again. Never, because here's what kids want. Kids seek experiences. Kids seek to master their world. And if you let them, they get it. That's fine, thank you. Now, obviously you're not going to hand them sharp knives at 6 months, because that's a different lesson. But to give them the opportunity to explore. When he started weaning, we just put out a range of foods for him, and at one point he ate nothing but bananas for 2 weeks. And I mean out of a wide selection of possibilities. He just wasn't interested. And we went, well, he seems to know what he wants, and after 2 weeks, then he started eating other things again. Now, I still have no idea what that was about, but he's a really healthy guy.
Their bodies know, darling.
Exactly.
Because I did the same with my kids.
Exactly.
And they'd eat either carrots for a week or raisins for 3 days, or
Yeah.
it was a natural instinct, I think, of what
Yeah.
their body needs, because they're more in tune with that. Like,
Yeah.
I struggle to find out what I need. I need a Mars bar.
Or 2.
That's just, I'm not in tune with the need anymore.
It's more the want.
That's
Exactly.
what I want.
But like learning to really trust their intelligence is part of the joy, I think, part of the joy of parenting.
Yeah.
He's
He was
amazing.
impressive then.
He's
That's a few
amazing.
years ago.
Yeah. He blows
I
everyone
think he
away.
was just starting on his interest in film and
That's right. Yeah, he's
film work.
just got his dream job as an assistant director to one of Australia's top movie directors. So he's pretty blissed out. Well, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you,
always
Charles.
always a joy.